Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Together, we'll explore and enjoy content and conversations around mastering transitions in our relations, our wellness, our careers, our families, and especially in our missions and visions. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have with me a new friend and a very special human. Her name is Liz Corwin. Liz is a military woman. Liz is a yoga teacher. Liz is, first of all, to be thanked for your service on behalf of all of us listening. Liz has served how many tours?
I did a tour in Iraq, Afghanistan, so 2 overseas.
Yep. She is a Navy pilot.
Yep, former Navy pilot.
Pilot, and you were a Navy pilot for how long?
I was active duty for 8 years, and now I'm still in the reserves. And I've been in the reserves now for about almost 7. So almost 15 years.
Wow. And you're how old?
36.
Wow, dude. Wow. I want to start this by saying I really do thank you for your service. My dad was in the Army for some time, and he never actually served, but he was in, and it's a very big choice. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's always a strange thing to be thanked.
I get
it's very, I don't know, it causes this, like, do I deserve this? Do they really know? Like, what, because when you're 21, I suppose, too, you're like,
did I even know what I was doing?
Did you know what you were doing to be thanked for?
Right.
So there's, that's always sometimes an odd thing to hear, but I also understand how important it is sometimes for people to get to say.
Right.
And
it is important because I could also, there was a period of time where I felt like, oh God, how do we have an Army, a Navy, an Air Force? Why are we doing this? And so there was also that. But then, as I got older, I realized this is a service. You've chosen to do a service like any other service for your country. And it doesn't necessarily mean you are, angry or belligerent or any of the things that one would think when one would think about such a thing. But you were doing a service, and you chose it at a young age. And I think that's very brave.
Yeah, it's taken years for me to recognize kind of what it is that you do give up, because it's not always what you think in terms of service and what you're doing. Later, I've really realized what the different direction it takes in your life.
Yeah.
And almost the healing that needs to come from it because you chose that.
Right.
So.
First of all, I just want to interrupt us by saying we are now officially surrounded by 2 construction zones. Below us, some pretty great jackhammering might happen, and above us, some hammering might happen. So I apologize for that, but I didn't want to postpone this conversation. I've been really looking forward to it. What led you at the age of 21 to want to serve?
My older brother had been in the Army, or he had done ROTC in college and done the Army. And so I didn't have a lot of family members that had done it, but he and I were pretty close. And the university I wanted to go to was a pretty expensive one. And the ROTC program was such a great opportunity to financially support yourself through college, but also have some pretty unique opportunities. And so, I don't know, I saw it more as this is very unconventional. And I think I did a lot for shock value, not just to anyone else, but to myself. And
at that time,
the things that you have to prove of yourself. And of course, you can say these things later in life as you look back and you're like, wow, the things that motivated us and all the things behind that. But it was definitely, it just sounded extreme and exciting. And unique. Yeah, that kind of draw me to it.
ROTC stands for?
Reserve Officer, Reserve Officer Training? I can't even remember anymore.
Okay.
Reserve Officer Training Corps or something.
I think that's what it is.
But yeah, so we just always called her Rotsy. In fact, my nickname on campus was like Rotsy Chick or something. Like it was just cute. A very playful name. But yeah, so it was just a great way for me to pay for college.
Yeah.
And make it through. So, and then of course you graduate and you're automatically an officer in the military.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. And then you decided to become a Navy pilot at what point? I just can't even. It
was like junior year, and we had to put in applications for, if you wanted to be a pilot, you had to put in an application.
Right.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I want to put in an application to do that. But I hadn't really thought of it up till then. Like, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, oh, I know that I want to join the military and become a pilot. It was more like, what's the next cool thing? Like, what's the next exciting thing? And so then now once I'm in it, I'm like, all right, well, that sounds like the most fun. So let's try it. I don't know. I didn't really have a plan. It was a little bit spur of the moment.
Well, it seems like the universe was obviously driving you in a certain direction, because here you are with a voice and a vision, which is really important. Let's walk through the next few years that brought about Walkabout Yoga and move from there. I have some more questions too.
So so I went into the military, active duty. I was flying for a long time. And
what was the training like? Hold on. Just wait 1 second. What was the training like? Was it crazy?
It was very stressful. That's actually when I found yoga.
I see.
That's how I found yoga, and I didn't know anything about what I was doing. Like, I didn't know what this yoga thing was. I just knew that I walked into this room, and for an hour, I was nobody, and nobody was watching me, and nobody was critiquing, and it didn't matter if I screwed up because nobody was looking at me. It was just this space, and I really had no other understanding of what I'd found. I think it was just like the little bit of silence of that own inner dialogue of attack and criticism and judgment and everything that goes with that. So I stumbled into this studio in like Meridian, Mississippi, like middle of nowhere. There happened to be this one yoga studio. I've always meant to reach back out to that place at some point and see if the teachers are still there. But that's where most of the advanced jet training is.
Got it.
There's 2 locations there in a place in Kingsville, Texas. But I went through Meridian and found yoga. And so the training, I mean, it's intense. They're yelling at you. They're trying to break you down. They're trying to make sure, obviously aviation is they need you to be confident, but they need you to not be overly confident.
Right.
So they make sure to keep you from being overly confident by, being very, like I said, we look at everything. It's every detail, every decision. You're off of altitude by 50 feet and, you're having some old retired, like 90-year-old former pilot like yelling on the simulator, like, you're off, you stink, you're terrible, like, fix yourself. So it's funny to look back now, but at the time it was a pretty intense place, and the other piece of that, you're trying to fly under the radar. Like, that's the big thing about being in flight school is you want to stay
literally and figuratively.
Literally and figuratively, you want to be kind of hidden and unknown, because the moment that you start to kind of like stand out on anybody's radar, the more they're watching what you do, right? And so the more criticism, the more whatever, it might be good, bad, doesn't matter, but the more obviously you're under the microscope then. So that was one of the times I think where I learned to start to, I don't want to say play small, but you realize that standing out could be dangerous.
Yeah.
At least that was kind of my first experience of that, of like, okay, try to be a little bit hidden, like, don't let your whole personality out. Don't let everything you're feeling, especially emotions. God, of course, don't cry when you're getting yelled at, but like, all of that. And of course, with a woman's voice on the radio, you're always under the microscope because everybody knows there's Liz, or
right.
I think my call sign at the time in flight school was Pebbles.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah. So that was a very intense time.
For those of you who are listening who are not raised in the U.S., Pebbles is the daughter of the Flintstones. just in case. And not.
Well, actually, there's a funny story with that one.
But tell me.
It's a little bit personal, and this is kind of funny that I'm sharing this on a podcast, but I had a kidney stone. 24-year-old girl has a kidney stone in flight school.
From all the stress.
Well, the stress, and I didn't drink water because as a female flying, having to go to the bathroom is pretty much the worst thing ever, right? The guys have contraptions very easy. So I always was dehydrated. My whole life I've been was dehydrated. So anyway, I had this incident and I mean, everything was fine. But so I got the nickname Pebbles in flight school.
That is unfortunate, slightly hilarious. And
It's funny
I'm
to laugh
sorry.
at now.
Yes, we can look back now and laugh.
Never shared that one.
My friend, the way that they break you down is so disturbing to me. And I don't want to criticize it because I know that it also makes the, soldiers and officers stronger in preparation for combat. I get that. But that's a lot to endure and to choose.
Yes.
There's somebody listening right now, I'm sure, who's endured that in the context of their home and their family. Mm-hmm. They've got broken down so that they would be stronger, quote unquote, but in fact, it's damaging. It's difficult, deleterious.
And it builds up.
And it builds up.
And those are kind of some of the things that I see now when I look back and we use that word service.
Yeah.
We don't recognize how much it requires of people to literally turn down the volume on pieces of themselves so that they can be what they need to be in the military and do it well. And there's nothing in that obviously we'll talk about this later when that flows into teaching yoga with these communities, because you can't ask people to just turn things off then. They can't. For so many years it's you push aside these emotions because you can't be run, when you're operating multi-million-dollar equipment, you can't have a moment where you're like, I don't feel good about this. My emotional state. You can't talk about those things. You can't acknowledge those things.
Right.
You can't let them out of the box. And so you put them in a box and you slide them away for a little bit. And then later in life, maybe you have a chance to open that box and see what's there.
Right. So you had an incident, actually.
I did.
Not unrelated to what we're talking about.
No, not at all. I was in a midair collision with another aircraft, in flying over, let's just say, someplace far away, and it was, that moment was a moment of reckoning for me in some ways, and the way that I am now with the yoga community and Walkabout Yoga. So much of that came from that split second of looking outside of my cockpit, seeing into my wingmans. We were that close. And then me attempting to maneuver mine to avoid the collision, but it was a little too late. And the next hour of my life as I flew back, because we were an hour or so from the aircraft carrier, we still had to get home, still to land. I just remember that hour of those voices in your head and talking to yourself as you're going back. And I think that, listeners out there everywhere have had those moments in their life where they've had that talk with themselves when something happened. And so I think it's actually pretty relatable, even though it sounds pretty extreme, but
No, for sure.
I think we all have some moments like that where that voice just begins to talk.
Right.
And yes, that was a turning point for me.
How was the voice talking?
It was saying, it was kind of like all voices talk. You get it's extreme. You go from one extreme to the other. You go from, especially with the training that we had of you make it happen, right? You figure it out. So a lot of military training is, you might not have all the information you need, but you have to make the best decision possible, right? And you might not have all of the assets available to you, but you have to still get it done. Mm-hmm. So there's this, in essence, this sense of make it happen, figure it out on the spot, especially under pressure. So you've got that one voice that's like, okay, I can do this. I can figure this out. You're taught to be very self-reliant in that sense. Take control. We don't get to just sit and think about this, do something.
Right.
Even if it's only the 80% solution or something. And then the other voices, of course, the ones that you're trying to
dissolve,
watch out for, but the ones that are also speaking to the fear and the guilt and the shame and the rage and everything else that we feel on the emotional spectrum.
Yeah.
And so those voices were having quite a battle.
For an hour.
For an hour, yeah.
With a missing wingtip.
With a missing wingtip, yep. And I didn't know at the time, you know, because when you come into land on the aircraft carrier, you have to slow down. And put your gear down, of course. And so you don't know if, you know, what's happened on your aircraft is going to still be stable at those lower speeds, right? If the aerodynamics are still going to hold up.
Yes.
So even though you're able to continue on at 350 knots, you know, 400 or so miles an hour, when you slow down to 200 miles an hour or so, like, what's going to be the controllability? So there were a lot of unknowns still at the time.
You're so lucky.
I'm lucky to be here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Landed the plane on the boat.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, that was
Was it a reprimand? Was it a...
It was... I remember as I lined up to come in for landing, you know, at this point they've landed all the other jets because, you know, it's just me and my wingman still airborne, and 5,000 people in that carrier watching and waiting for you to come in, right? And now, of course, they already know you've had this collision. You're already, you know, dealing with those voices of guilt and shame and everything else. And now you're like, okay, well, I can just remember telling myself, and excuse my French with this, but like, don't F up this last piece, you know, like at least end on a high note now.
Yes.
Pull it together enough to just land, have a good pass. You can do this. And so that's when the good voices, I don't even want to call them good and bad, but the positive.
It's the voice of reason.
The self-affirming, like, you can do this. You have to do this.
Yes.
You've been trained for this. You've got this. Calm down, breathe. And this is, of course, where the breathing really kind of came in for me. I took a lot of deep, long breaths on that hour trip back.
Yeah.
Came in and landed. I am proud to say and humbly say that it was one of the best passes and landings of my life.
Arm in the air, fist pound.
Oh, gosh. I'm grateful for that, you know.
Thank God.
Little high note. But with everything else going on, because there's plenty of else. But you land, and it's funny because every time I ever landed on the aircraft carrier, you know, when you put the hook down in the back, for those of you that, you know, people that may not know, with a Navy jet, you put the hook down in the back and there's 4 wires and you have to catch, usually we're aiming for the 3rd wire.
Yes.
If you catch the 1st wire, terrible pass, you know, terrible pilot kind of thing.
Right.
If you catch no wires, it's called a bolter, and you have to go around. And I was like, just don't do that, right? Like, then everybody's
the wire will hold you as you land.
Yeah, the wire stops you. And so there's 4. And I just remember being like, okay, you know, just like nail the landing, right? And I did. And like I was saying, every time I've ever landed on the aircraft carrier, my legs were always shaking because, you know, it stops you, but then you have to have your feet on the brakes to kind of taxi around. And my legs always shook, but this time, of course, they were shaking more than ever as I was taxiing. And then I pulled up. Everybody's standing, everybody's waiting, everybody's watching. Examining everything, and you climb out. And I just remember in those moments being like, enjoy this.
Yes.
Because this might be the last time.
And was it?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. But I do remember that hour. I'm grateful for those moments in that hour on the way back of being like, look outside. Look at what you're doing. Appreciate this for what it is. Wow. Brief or not. Wow. And then make this, enjoy this last hour. So,
dude,
yeah,
I have tears in my eyes. That's so serious.
Yeah.
Wow. It's funny, I wrote down a question to ask you. What was the best learning from your whole experience in the military that you wish you could give to somebody who will never be in the military?
My gift.
Like the finest learning that you've got.
My gift is honestly just self-forgiveness. You know, no matter what it is, no matter how deep and dark and how you stumble, to know that there is a way out, and it's waiting, and it's possible, and that is pretty much what I devote now my life to.
The self-forgiveness piece is something that we're always trying to learn, I guess, no matter what.
And I think that, that self-forgiveness piece comes very much hand in hand to me with self-love and what that actually looks like.
Yeah.
Because there's been so many times in my life I thought I knew what self-love was. I was like, oh, I've got self-love. I love what I do. I love what I am. I'm strong. I'm this. You talk yourself up, especially in that world where, God, it took a lot of positive self-talk to make it through all of that stress and tough and competitive times. And so I thought I knew what self-love was. Like, I thought I knew what self-confidence was. I thought I knew how to stand up for myself in that community, in that world, and even in the real world. And this moment that brought me to my knees, I think is what has been the gift of finding what it really means.
The catalyst. Mm-hmm. And so how long after that did you find yourself wanting to offer yoga?
So I came back from that, and that was a tough, I'd say 2 years afterwards of all the fallout and the things I went through. And, there's a lot of details to that, but suffice it to say that major, especially as a woman, and being so vulnerable, and so again under that microscope of everybody's watching, everybody's looking, and some things happened along the way as well that I had a lot of anger and rage for how the process had gone, because I don't think it would. I can say that it wouldn't have gone this way if I was a man. I can say that now. I couldn't have said that to you even 5, 6, 7 years ago, but I do believe that. And for the longest time, I don't think I wanted to admit that, because I didn't want to be just another complaining,
I get it.
That thing
Yeah.
that we all worry about sometimes as women, which is a shame in itself.
But it's a shame that we have to worry about being that person, that woman who
calls a spade a spade.
Yeah. That's a shame.
Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of...
but it's real.
Yeah, it is. It's very real. And so there were a lot of different pieces of this. Obviously, there was the accident itself.
Yeah.
Because I remember afterwards being like, I'm a really good pilot. I know I'm a good pilot. And I knew that my, all the guys that I flew with in the air wing, I knew that they knew this. But because of this one incident, you know what I mean? Like things like that just leave you so vulnerable to that shame. And so there was that piece. And then there was the piece of whether I even wanted to stay in the military because I was angry and had, rage of the way that the case was handled and the things that had been done. And so I had another piece of like, what am I doing in this? How do I fight from the inside out? Or do I just leave it and brush my hands and say, okay, if you're going to hold all the cards in the deck, then I want nothing to do with the deck.
Yep.
And I can gratefully say that I chose not to do that so that I could. Now I see it as secretly an act change from the inside.
Right.
But, I had to deal with all those different pieces. And so in the midst of that, I found a wonderful studio in Virginia Beach called Studio Bamboo, and a teacher that was very familiar with working with military. And I think she saw the healing that was needed within me.
Let's shout her out. What's her name?
Her name is Ann Richardson Stevens.
Ann Richardson Stevens.
Yeah, she does a lot with...
I feel like I've been in touch with her, possibly.
You probably have. Yeah, she's one of a student of Beryl Bender Birch's and does a lot with...
Best.
Yeah, she is. Beryl
I got to get Beryl on the podcast.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Making a note.
Yeah,
making a note.
Yeah, Studio Bamboo. It's called the Institute of Yoga. And so I started my 200-hour training after all of this. And I think a lot of us that find 200-hour trainings, do so not just to become yoga teachers, but because of there's something else.
Because we love it.
That catalyst has happened, and we're like, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know what it would do for me, but I was like, there's something about this yoga thing that makes me feel better. So
let's
start
do it.
there. What's the next right step with this?
Now, after the 200-hour training, where are you living? And what comes next that precipitates this entire, website and realm called Walkabout Yoga?
When I left active duty, I needed to get away.
Yeah.
And so I went on a walkabout. I literally went on a
Gosh, that's how it happened.
5-month walkabout and spent a month in Mysore, India, practicing Ashtanga with Saraswati Joyce. And,
Wow.
just went, I bought a one-way, did a round the world plane ticket and went. And I realized later on how serendipitous this name is, because a walkabout really is about exploring the world around you, but ultimately coming home and recognizing that it was all within you all along.
Yes.
And everything was there. And
Yes.
so the walkabout became how do we experience life and go outside of ourselves and end up in the military or end up in whatever career path we end up in, the life choices. And ultimately, we all return home at some point to this realization that, yeah, there's these life lessons to go through and learn and experience outside of our comfort zones, but it's not like you're ever finding anything. You're really just returning back to what was. And as Glennon Doyle would say, remembering,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Remembering all those things that were in us at the beginning. So the Walkabout Yoga, I started teaching yoga with some military communities with my teacher Anne on bases. And, I was traveling so much and I had the opportunity, and I had so many ins at military bases that it was really an opportunity for me to share it in different places. And that I never intended to do as much work with the military as I've done.
It's funny.
But it's all of those opportunities kept presenting themselves to me, calling me in.
It's how you heal the wound, the rent in the fabric.
Right, yeah. And so then I started the yoga retreats, and because I love to travel, and just, again, to me, traveling isn't just a luxury thing to do. I love seeing yourself in strangers' eyes, right? As
Totally.
Pico Iyer would say, like, it's such a way to learn who you are, is outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And obviously in an aircraft's kind of like that too, outside your comfort zone. So yeah, that's kind of where that all began, the Walkabout Yoga. And honestly, I don't know if I've necessarily had a plan with it. Things just kind of roll and happen. And, I wake up one morning and then I had this idea of like, oh, why don't I do a sponsorship where I can take a veteran on my yoga retreats? Like, you just wake up and these things kind of like, there really was no perfect plan at the beginning. It just evolved into all these different aspects of it. The yoga retreats and teacher trainings that are very much my teacher trainings and I'm not trying to promote them, but I choose to really focus on the psychological and chakra work.
Yeah.
In terms of healing all of those different pieces, because obviously I'm inspired by my own healing and inner journey with these pieces. So
anyone who says chakra properly, I'm sold. Please,
phew,
don't say chakra. The retreats, trainings, both are a part of Walkabout Yoga now. Who are you actually training? Are you doing 200-hour, 300-hour? What's happening there? Because that, I think, is very interesting for some people who are interested in helping and doing their yoga teacher training as a service.
I do a 200-hour teacher training, and I've actually, this is so cool. I originally was going to do it myself, and the girl that I ended up partnering with, her name is Nargiza Farrell. She's amazing, and she's an Anusara and bowspring teacher. And at the time, we were like, well, how are we going to get these two worlds? My background in Ashtanga and power and, Vinyasa style, and her bowspring and Anusara style. And it has become the most incredible experience of tolerance, I think, in the yoga community, of styles, the way that we talk about the body, the way that we experience energy in the body. So anyway, that morphed. Again, there was no plan with that. I had this whole plan. I was going to do this 200-hour by myself. Her and I met for lunch one day. She was like, Liz, you have the organizational skills. I've always wanted to lead a TT.
Let's
and I'm
do
like,
it.
okay, let's go.
Amazing.
And so our TT is, we lead a 200-hour. And what I'm really excited about, and this is kind of the next piece, is some online courses are coming up. And I had this vision in the last 2 weeks. I've been doing this kind of 8-week deep future self meditation course. And I want to pull together a bunch of specialists in every realm to create a course, an online course, Ayurvedic and meditation courses, obviously the yoga pieces, creative writing pieces, even my I have a dream worker I work with every week. Cool. Her name is Annette Hulefeld, and I'm helping build her website right now, but she does dream work, and she's also a psychotherapist. And she has all this cool shaman energy.
Yes.
Reader and tarot and stuff. And so I want to pull in all these different aspects and create this world of really finding this healing with all these different ways, and maybe ways that we haven't been exposed to. Because I know myself, like my experience with yoga was so limited, my experience with the physical practice. And only now am I starting to be like, oh, wow, the meditation world is pulling me in, and all of these other diet and, understanding the doshas and all these other pieces. So that's kind of in the realm of the next step. And I don't know what that's going to look like either. It's kind of like everything else. Things just kind of come together when they're supposed to.
Exactly. You're not really supposed to know in advance. You can have a nice vision, but let's see.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you also for following your nose, as it were. The concept of discipline came up for me a few times while you were talking, and I just wanted to make sure that I cover that because I'm curious. When it comes to your own practice now, and when it came to your time in the military, and now that you're out and you're creating curricula of your own for people to follow, what role does discipline play, and how has that evolved over time?
That's a great question. Discipline, people always say, I could never be in the military. I'm not disciplined. I can't take orders from other people. And I'm like, if you knew who I was, so rebellious. I've gotten in trouble so many times, especially in the military. And that actually came to play with some things later on when I was leaving the military, because they were like, you're kind of rogue. So anyway, I always find that amusing when people are like, I could never do that. And I'm like, I always say to people, you're more capable at a lot more things than we ever think that we are.
Right.
In every aspect, in every realm. But discipline, that word, I think it started early on with discipline of how do I really let go of this thing called the ego, and recognizing. To me, discipline is more of recognizing when, because I know I can lie myself into perfect oblivion. I think Sean Corn once said that. I love that line. I can lie myself into perfect oblivion if I want to.
Totally.
And so to me, my practice, not just on the mat, but it's, like I said, that self-forgiveness piece. I could completely become an addict to a yoga practice or a meditation practice. And I have to do this every day for this amount of time, right? And so discipline actually to me was, how do I let myself off the hook? How do I not have to do this strict regiment of whatever it is in life?
Wow.
And soften those edges. And again, the other side of that now is the discipline of really every time that I think I have something, checking myself, right? Like, oh, you think you got this? You think you know something? Not quite, right? You're not quite there. And so I think it's been the discipline of humility along the way. And luckily I've had life give me some great opportunities for that. But again, it's keeping ourselves in that realm of stepping into different experiences, being open, right? The discipline to be open, I think, is kind of what it comes down to.
It's the anti-discipline, dude.
But it's the discipline to keep doing that.
Yes. Really nice answer. I wasn't expecting it.
I wasn't expecting that either. I've never been asked that question.
It's really good. The couple more things that I have for you, and then I have just 3 sort of quick questions that I ask everyone. The salute. There was an aspect of it. There was I read a couple of pieces that you had, a couple of interviews and things that you'd done, and one in particular, an interview with Rob Schwer, the founder of Give Back Yoga.
Oh, he's amazing.
We love you, Rob. GiveBackYoga.org.
Yes.
I am a big fan.
We created some online free videos for military, actually.
Oh, let's
with
hear
Guillaume.
Okay.
Yeah, they're on YouTube.
Great.
Just YouTube. I think they're just called Yoga for Warriors videos.
Great.
Guillaume was so supportive, and Give Back Yoga. They flew me out to Colorado, and we taped these series, and it's 1 hour long class, and then 4 short, like one for hamstrings, hips,
that's great.
Shoulders, and back openers, a lot of the things that military members have issues with. And the best part was I brought 2 guinea pigs with me as my students, and they were these like special forces guys that had never done yoga before.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and so it's really funny as I'm trying to teach this class, and I'm like, put your arms over your head. no, put your arms over your head, and like, they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, what
like shoulder height.
Oh yeah.
Bless.
Yes. And so it's real. It's actually very raw. You'll see me have to give multiple cues and that's what I wanted these videos to be, was very raw, and truthful to what, people would experience, especially new members trying, or new yogis that are military. Because I used to teach in Germany, and people would ask me, they'd sneak up to me and be like, hey, I really enjoyed that, but I don't want to go into a yoga studio. How do I try yoga again? So that's when we came up with this idea with Give Back Yoga to create these videos so people could do them at home, in the comfort of their own home, to try it.
So YouTube, Yoga for Warriors. Would you put in Give Back Yoga?
You could put Give Back
Google
Yoga,
field?
or my name, Liz Corwin. I think it might be part of it. I think Gaiam.
It'd be good for guys who, if you're a guy listening and you have been lifting weights for a really long time, or you're, a former athlete of some kind and your shoulders are super tight, anything is super tight, this is a good resource for you, and it's free, and it's available right this second. So take a look. That's smart.
Sorry, back to Rob Schwar. Back in the interview.
He noted, thank you for that. He noted that he asked you about the salute, and you gave him a story about this one moment. I think when you were first.
Oh my God.
You were first becoming an officer.
Yeah. Oh, this is part of the interview that's gonna make me cry.
Sorry, baby.
My gunnery sergeant, he was so hard, and he was the toughest guy I ever knew. And he was,
gunnery sergeant.
My gunnery sergeant Smith, and if he's out there, he's no longer a gunnery sergeant. He's now retired, but he made it much higher up in the ranks. And but at the time, he was my gunnery sergeant Smith, and he was so tough, and he would yell at us, and but he had this tender heart underneath. You could just tell, right? And he really became a father, kind of like a father figure through college for me, because, of course, as a young girl in college, there's lots of ways to get lost. And he was really there for me. And anyway, the day that I graduated college and you put on the military uniform, and my older brother in the Army was there with my grandfather to put my, the officer ranks and things on you, and kind of, now it's official, you're an officer, and you render that first salute, your first salute ever that you are given. And Gunnery Sergeant Smith, I'm 21, he's 45 to 50, and he's saluting me now. It was after 4 years of him yelling at me because I wasn't quite an officer yet. And he saluted me, and I realized that his belief in that salute had nothing to do, of course it was to the person and things too, but it had to do, he believed so strongly in the structure and what he believed in, and what he was serving.
Yes.
And I took that with me forever. Just, it's not about you. And I think this really ties into the yoga community too. It's when we feel in service, when we feel like there's something higher than us, that place of connection and community and humility, and it's so powerful, and so I do like to, there's a comparison there to me, is when you're in service and when you can really get out of your own way and recognize that there's something more that we're connected to, and therefore we're connected to each other through that. So the salute kind of has that meaning. Is pretty powerful.
It's a mudra, dude.
It is. It's a mudra.
Just like namaste. Wow. I felt that so deeply. I can just picture your little... Did you have long hair at the time?
Oh, I had very long hair. Yes, yeah.
How did you tie it up? Did you put it all up in a little knot?
Yeah, it was always in a bun or something.
Behind your head?
Yeah, but I kept my long hair forever. I recently just cut it for the first time in my whole life. I'd never had
It's actually quite nice.
Thank you. Yeah, but I kept long hair because of the military. Because then a Friday, Saturday night, I wanted to be somebody else.
Yeah.
It sounds silly, but it was my way of rebellion.
Yeah, totally.
Keeping my long hair so that on a Friday, Saturday night, I feel like a woman again, like really feel like a woman. So,
Sure.
And I think just recently I was like, you know what? That I don't need that anymore. I mean, it served its purpose for the time when I wanted it. Yeah. And so I shed it recently. But
super nice.
Thank you.
There are 3 questions that I ask everyone. First is, what needs healing right now?
Connection. Seeing ourselves in others. Oh my gosh. for me, this is what everything comes down to: is how do I see myself in others, and how do I recognize the pieces of me, that interplay of that connection, that unity, that compassion, right? And until we can find that self-love and all those things we talked about, that self-forgiveness, we're so hard on others and we can't find that connection then. So that's why I believe so strongly in healing those things inside of ourselves, because it's the only way that we're going to find that connection again.
So your assignment, if you're listening for this particular episode, is find someone you emulate. I'm making this up as I go, but I think it's the right one. Find someone you emulate and find yourself in them. What part of them looks like you? What part of you looks like that? And find that connection. I think that's a really nice way to express
that's
that.
like tapping into that the vibration.
Yeah.
When you tap into the vibration of who you want to be, you will become.
Yeah.
Because now you are in tune with that vibration, and so that person, like you said, that you emulate, or even tapping into that frequency, will take you there.
Very
and you
nice.
become a part of it.
Very nice. And I would make notes on it if you are going to, willingly take on the assignment. I would make some notes, write down this person's name that you emulate, write down the qualities that you feel you either currently embody or you know you can in some eventual time embody, and start to connect the dots. I love that. Second question, what is your favorite view of all? And it doesn't have to be anything obvious. Like, people give some pretty off the wall answers, which I love. What's your favorite view?
View.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big view to look at, view to hold. My favorite view. Lately, honestly, I've been doing a lot of these future self meditations. My favorite view is tapping into that vibration of that woman that I want to be. When I'm that woman, and this morning actually I was meditating for a bit with my meditation teacher. His name's Peter Upperman. Wonderful. I'm doing one of his courses right now, an 8-week course. But this morning I tapped into it, and I was trying to think about what's going to happen today on this podcast. And my favorite view, I would say, is when I can tap into that vibration of who that woman is, of just fierce love. Just seeing the world with just fierce love.
It's all that comes when you get older. I think you're 36 now.
36, yes.
So I'm 12 years older, but it really is all that comes. As the years, wash behind you, you just start to see, and I know that I'm still young. Please, if you're older than me, I say this with the utmost respect, and I'm not saying that I'm old by any means. But I do feel the truth of the years falling away from me, and just what's left is no stuff. It's just love. Like, how do I get closer to that experience every second?
And we have those moments where we tap into it, right? And I think everybody there's some point in your day where something that you can tap into, and maybe that's their next homework assignment, is find that one thing that makes you, feel that for that moment. Bring something to mind, especially gratitude, such a great way to capture that very quickly and to hold on to that and to be able to see that vision for a moment. And again, then it becomes, well, how do I get back there quicker?
Yes.
When I fall away from it, how do I get back there quicker?
Yes.
That kind of,
it's a recovery.
The recovery,
it's the
yes,
recovery.
Exactly. The recovery. How quickly can I get back there each and every time, especially when triggered or angry or cut off or whatever in traffic, or how do we get back there?
Very good. And lastly, what does prayer mean to you?
Surrender. Again, surrender. To me, everything just comes back to when I surrender and I can remember what that connection feels like with everything, each other, the universe, the spirits, our own soul contract and journey, and the healing that needs to take place. That's what prayer means to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on.
The site is Walkabout Yoga, walkaboutyoga.com. Liz Corwin, you're a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, Elena.
Thank you.